Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we are going to do adjectives and their comparative form and superlative form. So let's begin our today's video with adjectives. What are adjectives? Adjectives are the words which are used to describe your nouns. So words which are describing your person, place or a thing are your adjectives. Now let's take an example of a thing. Say dress. It's a beautiful dress. So I'm describing my dress as beautiful by using the word beautiful. So beautiful becomes my adjective. An ugly duckling. So duckling is my noun. Ugly is describing the duckling. So ugly becomes my adjective. Now we have some more examples in the form of sentences where we have used our adjectives. Let's do them. The dirty pig rolled in the mud. So now the pig is dirty. The word dirty is describing the pig. So dirty becomes our adjective. The old man is wise. My noun is man. And how is he? He is old. So old is my adjective. Says the old man is wise. Wise is also describing my noun. So wise also becomes my adjective. So in this sentence we have two adjectives. Next one is a chubby baby giggled. My noun is a baby. And how's the baby? Baby is chubby. So chubby becomes my adjective. So you see how we use the adjectives to describe our nouns. It becomes more vivid. The picture is becoming more vivid when you're using adjectives. Now let's understand what are the comparative form of the adjectives. When we have comparative form of the adjectives, comparative word is derived from the root word compare. When you're comparing the two things, we are using the words to describe the comparison, and the adjective changes its form from the original form to the er gets added at the end of the adjective, or we add more just before the adjective. Now let's understand the usage in the sentences. My dress is more beautiful than hers. That means I'm describing my dress by using the adjective beautiful, but here I'm making a comparison of my dress with somebody else's dress. And now when I make a comparison here, I'm using more beautiful. So more beautiful becomes my adjective. Today is hotter than yesterday. I'm again making a comparison of the weather. I'm saying today it is hotter than yesterday. So I'm making a comparison between today and yesterday. I'm using the word adjective hot. But when I'm using it in the comparative form, I'm not using it as hot itself. I'm changing its form to hotter. Now you see in the first example, I added more beautiful. But in the next example, I said hotter. So either I'm using more before the adjective or adding er at the end of the adjective. And how do we know where to put more or to add er? Is there a rule to it? Yes, there is. So when we have our comparative adjectives, when we have our in the adjective, when we have just one syllable, say examples of hot, it has just one syllable. Whenever we have one syllable in our adjective, we add er at the end of the adjective. But if we have more than one syllable, say for example courageous, so we have more than one syllable, we add more before the adjective. Let's understand them better with more examples. The house is big. So I'm not making any comparison. My adjective is big. So I'm describing my noun that the house is big. Now if I'm going to make a comparison, his house is bigger than Tina's. That means I'm comparing the house, I'm using the adjective big it changes its form to bigger. Now if you notice, I added a G. And why is that so? Because when we have our adjectives which have a consonant and just before the consonant we have our vowel, the consonant at the end gets doubled up in comparison. So just not just one G, we're going to have two G here. So big turns into bigger just because it's one vowel sound. Sorry, one syllable sound. And now let's take more example. Hot becomes hotter. Again, it has a vowel just before our consonant, so we will have an extra tree. This is wise. When we are using it as a comparison, we use it as wiser. Since we already have an E in the end, we are just going to add R at the end. So now adjective in the R, big, in the comparative form it becomes bigger. We had hot, it becomes hotter. If we have wise, it becomes wiser. Now let's take the example of more adjectives which have more than one syllable. If my adjective is careful, it will turn into more careful. Careful has more than one syllable. Next one is so now we have courageous. If we have to use it in comparison in a sentence, I'm going to use it as more courageous. Why? Because courageous has more than one syllable. Let's use it in a sentence. John is more courageous than David. I'm comparing John and David, just two people. I'm having a comparison between these two. I'm using my adjective as courageous, but changes its form to more courageous. So courageous turns into more courageous. Now there's an exception to this rule of ER and more, where we have some words which have more than one syllable. They end in Y. So all those adjectives which end in Y and they have more than one syllable, irrespective of the number of syllables that they have, they will always end in IER. Happy has more than one syllable. Happy has two syllables. And ideally, it should have been more happy in the comparative form. But no. In case of the adjectives which end in Y, we omit the Y, we replace it with I, and we add ER. So happy turns into happier. Let's take more examples. Dirty. Dirty becomes dirtier because I'm going to remove my Y, I'm going to add I, I'm replacing my Y with I, and I'm going to add ER in the end. One more example, ugly. And just like our previous examples, ugly turns into uglier. And now let's move on to superlative form of our adjectives. What are superlative form of our adjectives? Now adjectives which are used to make a comparison between amongst all of the people. So it's not just one, it is more than two people that we're more than two entities, more than two people that we're making a comparison. So we use the superlative form of the adjectives. She is the best teacher in the town. So I am comparing all the teachers and I'm saying she is the best. So best is going to be my superlative form of our adjective. Let's take more example. She is the wisest of all. So wise is our adjective. In the superlative form, it turns into wisest. She is wearing the most beautiful dress. My dress is beautiful, described as beautiful, but because the comparison is being made amongst all the dresses that we have, it turns into most beautiful. So in the superlative form of our adjectives, we have est at the end of our adjectives or most before the adjective. Same rule is applied in the superlative form of the adjectives. If the adjective has one syllable, then it will have est at the end of it. And if it has more than one syllable, we add most before the adjective. So for example, hot turns into hotter when it's the comparative form, but in the superlative form it turns into hottest. Wet becomes wetter in the comparative form, and in the superlative form it becomes wettest. Big, bigger, biggest. And let's take more examples where we add more before the adjective. So we have courageous, it turns into more courageous in the comparative form. It turns into most courageous in the superlative form. Most careful, most tenacious. All of these are the examples where we use the superlative adjectives. And again, the exception comes to the superlative form too. If you have your adjective and it ends in y, we will remove that y, replace it with I, and add est at the end. So happy will turn into happier in terms of superlative adjective, but will turn into happiest. When I got the award, I was the happiest of all. That means I'm comparing my happiness with the other people and I'm just telling that my happiness was the most. So it is happiest. Now dirty will turn into dirtier in the comparative form, and in the superlative form it will turn into dirtiest. And so goes for ugly turns into uglier and ugliest. Now there's another exception which does not follow er and more rule for the comparative adjectives, or est or most rule for the superlative adjectives. These form of our adjectives are called irregular adjectives. So they do not turn into er at the end or more for the comparative form, or we do not add est at the end of those or most to. The total form of the adjective completely changes it in the comparative form and the superlative form. Let's take some examples. Good is my adjective. I am a good teacher. Teacher is my noun. Good is describing the teacher. So I would say good is our adjective. Now when I'm comparing, I am a better teacher than her. So I'm making a comparison of myself with somebody else. And I would say I'm comparing and I'm using the adjective. So neither the good will turn into gooder or it will turn into more good. It changes its form to better. It changes from good to better. And when I'm using it in the superlative form of the adjective, in a sentence like, I'm the best teacher in the town. So I'm making a comparison of all the teachers. I'm using the superlative form of the adjective good, and it turns into best. So you see, neither we added est at the end, nor we had to add most, but it changed its form from good to best. Let's take one more example. Bad. That's a bad bug. So you're describing the bug as bad. And when you're comparing, say the caterpillar is worse than the beetle. So you're comparing and using the adjective as bad. When the comparative form, the adjective bad turns into worse. So we say the caterpillar is worse than the beetle. But in the superlative form, it changes to worse. It is the worst bug that I've ever seen. You are describing the bug, you're using the adjective as bad, but in the superlative form, it changes its form to worst. And another example would be far. Far turns into farther or farthest. So when I'm making the comparison, I'm using farther instead of farer or more far. So we use farther, and in the superlative form it changes to farthest. And that's all for today's lesson.